On an early November morning, a cyber worm was released, infecting 10% of the computers on the internet over the next 24 hours. University students first flagged the widespread attack, which infected many institutions. It stopped military and university networks, delayed emails for hours, and resulted in some wiping their systems clear to get the worm off of it. Costs were estimated to be $100,000 to over $1 million. The source was a 23-year-old programmer the FBI eventually found, indicted, and convicted. This was despite the knowledge that Robert Morris, who was behind the supposed attack, had simply created a relatively innocent worm to crawl the internet, which was only 60,000 interconnected computers at the time. It was 1988, a year before the World Wide Web was introduced, and it was the first cyber attack on the internet. The Morris worm showed the internet had vulnerabilities before most of the world knew it existed or even owned a computer. Cyber attacks are now constant and targeting individuals and organizations through phone calls, mobile devices, and computers. Welcome to the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast with guest, cybersecurity expert Hunter Geerts. So if you haven't experienced a cyber attack, there's a good chance that you have just missed out. About 70% of Canadians, according to Stats Canada, have experienced an attack in 2022. And when it comes to cyber attacks, can you avoid them? Or is everyone a potential target?
Everyone is a target. Of course, there are different varying threats out there, and who they target changes for every threat. But yes, everyone is a target of something.
And that's a big challenge, right, for everybody. So, and is it one small mistake that ultimately opens that door to allow a cyber attacker in?
It can be anything from one small mistake. Most commonly, it's a series of small mistakes that all lead to a failure cascade. It only takes one click, but in order for that one click to happen, there was definitely a process mistake along the way, and maybe a software mistake and hardware mistake too.
So there are opportunities are there, and we were chatting about this last week, and so simple thing that people can do is keeping their devices updated was one thing that you were saying. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping your device updated is one of, if not the single best way to prevent yourself from being breached, whether you're a single person on your home side or if you're a business with thousands of computers. Most of the major cyber attacks that hit organizations, almost all of them have part of the exploit chain is something that has already been discovered and patched by Microsoft, by Apple, by Google, any of the major hardware and software vendors. They all rapidly discover and fix those flaws. But if an organization doesn't patch, doesn't matter, because those flaws will be exploited.
Yeah, and it's not that, like, a lot of people get these updates even on their phone and their computer, and sometimes they think, oh, it's just a feature update.
Oftentimes there's security updates in there as well, and a lot of the times if you look at any of the Apple iOS updates, it'd be like, hey, we added this new emoji, right? It's very common, that's a very popular update, but then a lot of people skim over the line that says important security and bug fixes. And that single line is what differentiates it from just a feature update to a full-blown, very important security update that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, updating is always critical, even on your phone, especially on your phone.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly jump onto those ones really quickly, and including the ones that are, I work on Windows devices, so yeah. I'm updating those pretty much as soon as they're available. So are we seeing targets on organizations, individuals, or both?
Definitely both. They experience different types of attacks, but they both experience cyber attacks. On the personal side, you have things that are more like phishing scams. Hey, I'm a Nigerian prince, send me $50 to unleash my funds, that sort of thing, because they're trying to get every single person to send them $50. That's a lot of dollars when you add up the amount of people in the world. On the business side, you're running into more corporate-focused scams like, hey, I'm the CEO, go buy me gift cards, right? It's different types of scams, but it's still scams. Of course, those two are email examples, but there's many others.
And they're pulling in some big money. Essentially, it's an industry now.
Oh, definitely.
And it's a global industry. So what's it worth right now?
Right now, it's worth about $1.5 trillion in revenue for cybercriminals. And from ransomware alone, which is one particular type of attack that generally just hits businesses in one particular way, is $1 billion of that alone. And that's just ransomware. And then the scams are a huge part of that. Other forms of financial fraud, crazy amounts of money at play. Everyone is a target. Of course, there are different varying threats out there, and who they target changes for every threat. But yes, everyone is a target of something.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you can see that in the different news stories throughout the week, and throughout the month. We've seen lots of different governments help. They'll go after anybody, individuals, you name it. So there's not really anybody that they're willing to leave alone.
Yeah, absolutely not. And to that end, even if they were willing to leave you alone, a lot of times all those attacks are automated. So you're going to get caught in the crossfire, even if they're not targeting you specifically.
So tell us the difference between a targeted attack and an automated attack.
A targeted attack is, hey, I'm looking to get into Tim's bank account, so I'm going to send Tim a specifically crafted phishing email to try and get his bank account details. And then that bank account member, let's say, hey, Tim, I know that your dog is a terrier. This is a scene from a movie, actually. Hey, I know that your dog is this specific terrier, and so we're going to send you a phishing email to join the terrier club and set up an account. And when you're setting up an account, set up the security questions. And the security questions might just happen to match the ones that your bank uses for your personal bank account. So that's an example of a specific attack. Of course, most of the time, people aren't looking to target specific individuals unless you're a CEO or a CFO or someone in a position of financial power. Most of the time, it's automated attacks. Hey, I'm John or I'm your daughter and I'm in trouble, I'm in jail, I need you to pay my bond. That's a very common one, particularly more recently with anyone who's immigrated to a nation recently, that's been a huge thing. They'll call the parents back home, say, I'm your daughter, I'm in jail in this new foreign country and the police just need some money to get me out. And that's horrifying. And of course, maybe they haven't spoken to their daughter in years, so they don't really understand what they sound like. And with AI coming on the scene now, that's one of those places where AI is a huge leverage point. It's getting worse and worse every year.
And that's it. They're masking somebody's voice. They're copying somebody's voice to be able to use it and call somebody, pretend to be them, which is just incredible technology. But it's a very unethical way of using it, right? The cyber attackers are using artificial intelligence to improve their results. This is particularly true for individuals. So tell me some other things that are happening to individuals where they're getting attacked like they just did.
So for individuals getting attacked, so we just went over phishing emails, essentially, direct scams. There's also things like malicious advertisements are a very, very common way for people to get compromised, particularly when the advertisement is using a never-before-seen exploit that hasn't been patched by any major vendors, or if you haven't updated your web browser yet. Tim, do you have a little orange bar at the top of Google saying update now?
Yeah.
You should click that update button, right?
Yeah.
Scrolling to any website, frequently news websites are often victims because it's not the news website putting up the malicious advertisement. They're selling that website space to someone else, to an advertising network. And then the advertising network sells that to a malicious threat actor. And then the malicious threat actor puts up a malicious advertisement. So you have a perfectly legitimate news organization, any of the major ones, or all of the major ones, any of them, right? You go to this website that you trust, that you don't expect to be malicious, and it can start trying to attack your computer.
Yeah, this is crazy, right? And this is, I just want to point out, like, I've been doing this type of work for a while, and one of my the first time that I came across somebody getting something on their computer from a site, it was from a site, not from email. It came from a website that they visited. I was able to trace it back for them as a friend of mine that was helping out, and it was like, wow, that's they took an ad, essentially, just like you said, and replaced it with something that was malicious and sucked somebody into it. So it's very difficult. So you have to put those protections in place on your own system.
You have to have those protections, and not just one protection is a common mistake. There is no silver bullet for being secure. If you take one thing away from this, there's no silver bullet, right?
Right.
There's no silver bullet. You have to do many, many things. You have to have your antivirus running. You have to be up to date. You have to make sure your web browser is up to date. You have to make sure that you're going to hopefully trusted websites, which, as we just discussed, isn't bulletproof, but that's one more step. You have to be aware to not click on all of those things. There's all of these individual steps you need to take in order to try and be secure. Yeah. And even then, nothing is perfect. That's why Microsoft, to this day, still gets hacked, despite their hundreds of millions of dollars that they spend on security every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Apple devices are still able to be maliciously attacked, but we just don't see it as often. They haven't been as targeted.
Well,
I think
that's
actually secure, right? That's what the word has been, or is it?
That's a common misconception, actually. With Apple devices in particular, all of the most popular exploits for iPhones, for example, which are commonly thought of as unhackable, which is completely false, the most common exploits for phones are frequently found on iPhones because they have such a wide installed user base. And most importantly, that install base is among people in positions of power, right? A lot of people see an iPhone as a status symbol. So if you're a CEO of a company, you're probably using an iPhone. Even if for no other reason other than it's the cool thing to do, because everyone's human, right? The human element is important in security. And so you probably have an iPhone. And there are, at any given time, there are several active exploits for iPhone that allow people to take control of the phone. Some of those are known to Apple, some of those are patched, or most of them are patched inherently, right?
Yeah.
But some of those stuff have never been seen before and are currently being used by government agencies or on the black market, being sold on the black market to criminal agencies to take over your phone. If someone has access to your phone via one of these tools, then they can get into your bank account. I can guarantee right now that everyone who's listening to this will have on their phone banking, either the bank account or their password manager for the bank account, or I open the web browser and they've logged into their banking in their online app, and it probably remembers their credentials and they can log in, right? So access to a phone is access to your life, and it's very powerful. So Apple 100% still gets hacked.
It's all these access points. So the email is a separate thing on your phone, and it's there. So it's like if you are, using your email and click something and open it, they're in.
Potentially, yeah, depending on what's going on. It's definitely everything is a risk.
Several courses are being developed, and I'm happy to let you know that the first course will be on CanadianTraining.ca really soon. Job interviews, public speaking, messaging, and speaking to media. How to speak more confidently to groups of people in meeting settings will be our first course. It will teach you skills useful for many settings which require you to speak where your nerves may be winning the battle right now. Launching soon. Sign up for updates and early access at www.canadiantraining.ca to learn how to speak more confidently to groups of people. Subscribers will also get free checklists, guides, and more. Canadiantraining.ca. Learn from our mistakes. Someone should. Let's talk about ransomware and what that is. We've heard a fair bit about that in recent years, and particularly most of the attacks initially were after organizations, and some of those organizations, they're attacked. What they do is they lock you out of the system and say, hey, pay us money, usually in Bitcoin, and we'll let you have your data back. So what is the first thing somebody should do if they have an experience of ransomware attack?
Step one in a ransomware attack, and this is an identical step one for every single organization on the planet, other than maybe the government, some governments, and that is call your check your cyber insurance policy, and potentially call your insurance broker to see if any of your current policies cover cyber insurance. Because if they do, then you need to do what your cyber insurance tells you to do, or you might not get paid out, right? So step one, if you have cyber insurance, this is what it's here for. So you need to call your cyber insurance, and they almost all of the time, because they don't want to pay you out for any more than they have to, they have teams in place that they pay 24/7 to be ready to go to respond to your cyber attack and help lock down your business. So that's step one, is call your cyber insurance, review the policies, and see what do they want you to do. Some of them are going to be shut down your systems. Some of them are never shut down your systems because we want evidence. Some of them are going to be turn everything off and disconnect from the internet, or only disconnect from it. Everyone's going to be different, and you need to do what they say first and check that first. And you should already know this. This should be part of your disaster response plan. So that's step one. And then from there, depending on what they say, depending on what data you have, depending on what you offer, you're going to do either your down mode to try and prevent it from spreading, or you're going to go into wipe and recovery mode, where you start wiping existing systems and restoring from backups and restoring your data. Potentially, you're going to be partitioning off your critical systems to get those up and running. If you're someone like a shipping company, the first thing you're going to do is going to get all of your logistics up and running again, right? Everything else could wait for you if you're a shipping company, but you need the heart of your business running. So first insurance, then disaster response plan, essentially is what it comes down to. Yeah. So it's important to have really good process. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, is to have good processes in place that are known and you've trained and people know what to do in that moment. And so very key for this. Should people pay ransomware? It's never worth it. Even when you pay your ransomware, you only get your data back about half of the time, sometimes less. You get all of your data back. And then almost in 90% plus of those cases, you're just leasing your data back from Fate because now they know that you're willing to pay and they already got into your system once. There's a solid chance they never left. There's a solid chance they can get in again the same way. And even if they can't, they'll find a new way because they know that you're willing to pay them now. Yeah. Paying the rent. And even in, and that's assuming you get your data back. A lot of the time they just say, oh, you paid me. Pay me more, right? And they just keep escalating and escalating, and you're never going to get it back.
Does it eliminate you from future attacks?
Not at all. It makes you a significantly more likely target for future attacks.
Yeah. Because they know that, hey, you paid it. We already have a backdoor in. They probably maybe have set up another backdoor.
Frequently, yes.
Yeah. So it makes it very challenging. What about if someone reaches out? Definitely had this experience where a breach happened, and funny enough, shortly after that, we received notifications that from people. It's like, oh, I can help you. I can get your data back. Just pay me this amount of money, and I'll do this for you. You'll get all your data back. Is there anything there if you get some random person that's out on the internet thing?
I think we all know the answer by now that unsolicited messages from people on the internet are never good. Or text messages to your phone, or calls to your phone. They're never a good idea. Very frequently with ransomware, you've posted about it somewhere on social media, or someone else has, and then the scammers will see that, and they smell blood in the water. They know that you're in a vulnerable state. They know you're stressed. So they know you're not thinking right, and they want to reach out and save you. And your first instinct is, yes, someone's here to save me, and it's a trap again. They just want you to send them some money, or give you access to your systems again, and they'll come after you again. They don't have access to your data. The only way to get your data back, if it's going to work at all, is by paying that Bitcoin. No one who contacts you is going to be able to help you.
Going back to phishing, if people don't understand, is it's spelled like phishing, but starts with a PH instead of an F, so it's a little bit different. And we see it almost daily through almost any account. It's constant. The junk mail that you're getting is pretty much all phishing for something. I've noticed that, and they're getting very, very creative. They look like banks. They look like a hotel, travel, all sorts of different things. And of course, they look like somebody you know. So,
yes.
What can you give for tips for people to sort of help them to navigate that? And then also, what are they trying to do when they're phishing?
They're trying to make money. That is right. That's the overarching goal for these attackers, is they're trying to make money somehow. Usually that's by compromising your credentials in some way, whether that's via your bank statement or via your bank accounts, via your email to scam your clients, via sending you a fake invoice that you're going to send them money, right? So that's what they're trying to do. So then how do you defend against it? The answer is essentially be hyper vigilant about anything that involves money or account login details, and be moderately paranoid about everything else, right? So if it involves anything banking, then you need to ask yourself, were you expecting this email or message or text message or anything? Were you expecting it? Who is it from? Does it match something? Does it make sense? And then never click on a link that's in an email, because those links, even if everything else looks good, those links could still be fake. So you want to navigate directly to the banking website or whatever it is directly and log in there without clicking on a link in an email. That way you're not clicking on anything malicious, and then you can review to see if it's true. A lot of the times the email is true. You do have fraud on your credit card, but sometimes it's not. And trying to differentiate those two can be very hard. So just go to the root source, and check that directly. If you're getting an email from someone that you trust, say a client of yours that's working with you and has sent you, say, something, but it seems just a little bit off, just a little bit different, right? Via a method that you haven't found via email, call them. Go to their website, give them a call. Don't go to the website via a link in their email, remember? Don't click on links, emails. Go to the website directly, give them a call, send them an email back. Don't reply to it, because you could be replying to the wrong address. Create a new email and send it to the address you know is right, and see if they send you something back about it. Do they know about it? Essentially, trust but verify is the root of all of it.
They're phishing for details. They're phishing and they're trying to build essentially a database on individuals or organizations to which they can tear down walls eventually, right? And so one of the things that I've always been aware of is these quizzes that you see on social media where they're asking for, where were you born, what was your birth date, who's your sister, all that kind of stuff. Would you be filling out those types of quizzes and post?
Well, the answer to that is more nuanced than I think you might think. On the surface, it sounds ridiculous when you put it that way. You're kind of begging the question a little bit here, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But when you really think about it, what are you giving up? Or if you're giving up anything confidential, maybe your niece's name, well, is that confidential? Because they're on Facebook and you're probably friends with them, and everyone has the same last name. So people can guess stuff like that. So what's the reward? The reward is going to be maybe a little funds shared amongst your friends, and the risk is potentially giving away confidential information. Personally, I wouldn't fill those out. But honestly, it's a lot harder than you think, because if you're posting any of that, you're probably posting it on social media, or someone else has posted it about you. Be mindful of what you're giving away. Maybe don't give away your mother's maiden name, the childhood name of your favorite book, that sort of thing. Those security questions that get asked you by banks and by the government agencies. But things like what's your first name and your last name, those details are out there. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, so you just got to be selective. It's like the same questions that I'm getting asked as security questions on a regular basis, maybe don't use those ones.
Exactly. Of course, even that is somewhat of a trap, because you're never going to remember all the security questions you've been asked. So it's really try and make your security questions unique and try to segregate the data in your mind. But it's a losing battle. Security questions are a bad thing most of the time, security-wise, because of that.
Curious question while we're on this topic. There's a lot of these ones going around where it's like a legal message that I hereby remove the permission for so-and-so to do this. Do those do anything?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
They have no legal bearing. And even if they did, they wouldn't the moment they crossed the border, right? It doesn't matter where you live. The laws don't apply across the globe.
Okay, so let's talk about organizations and how they can protect themselves, be it they're small organizations, small businesses to larger businesses. What can they do to protect themselves from cyber attacks?
That's a very broad question, which of course means this is a very broad answer. And the fundamental truth is you need to invest in cybersecurity, which of course I say it sounds kind of obvious, but really there's 4 options with cybercrime and with cybersecurity risks in general, right? You can accept that you're going to be ransomware. You can accept that you're going to be phished and just lose the money and pay it out. We already discussed that's not really viable. You can avoid that cyber risk by using pen and paper. That's not particularly viable, although I will mention that that's the reason I don't use Lenovo devices, is because Lenovo is a Chinese-owned company, at least to a major extent, which means that the Chinese government can have their hands in it. And that is a risk that I don't have any need to take personally. There are perfectly good alternatives out there, so I don't take it. I use other manufacturers. So that's a practical example of avoiding the risk, but of course that doesn't work. I still need to, or for the vast majority of cases, it doesn't work. I still need to use email. I still need to use a computer, use websites, of course, right? So then you can transfer your risk to cyber insurance. But cyber insurance is going to require that you have certain mitigations in place, otherwise they won't insure you. A lot like home insurance or commercial building insurance is going to require a fire suppression system in the building, otherwise you won't be insured. Exact same concept, cyber insurance requires you to have cybersecurity measures in place. So that brings me to point number 4, which is you need to have mitigations in place. That could be anything from a spam filter to antivirus to application whitelisting to cybersecurity training, all of those things. And the way you decide which of those things you implement and what you implement and how much is you need someone who cybersecurity is part of their job. So to that end, you're generally going to be looking at either hiring an employee or contracting a cybersecurity firm, much like someone like myself, Kit Professionals, cybersecurity firm. This is our bread and butter. And when you contract a cybersecurity firm, they're going to take a look at what is your environment like, what is your budget like, what sensitive data are you dealing with, what's the results or the consequences if you do get breached, that whole risk-reward ratio, and then based on that, make specific recommendations of what actually needs to be implemented. A freebie one that I'll give everyone here right now is you should have an EDR, which is a more advanced antivirus, and preferably one that is monitored by 24/7 SOC. It's a relatively cheap thing, but it is fairly impactful in the grand scheme of things in preventing cybersecurity attack or cyber attacks. So that's one of those mitigations I think everyone should have.
So what are some simple steps that an individual can do to protect themselves?
Yeah. So they're for individuals specifically, not corporations, because for corporations, you should genuinely seek someone, either internal or external. It's very cost effective. For individuals, there are many things you should be doing as an individual, and the many things that I do for myself, but they're far too numerous to list here. I think the very basics, the very, very minimum is make sure you're always patching, always click that update button, just update your work, just save your work, update. It's not a huge deal. It's much better to update than it is to be compromised, and make sure that your antivirus is running. Make sure that your firewall is turned on. Of course, if you're running Windows, which you probably are, or Mac OS or anything like that, if you turn off your antivirus or your firewall because it's breaking something, then it'll give you a little warning, say, hey, it's off. Just go click that button, turn it back on. It's probably not breaking anything. And if it was, it's probably not anymore. So they're constantly being updated. Windows updates something like 5 times a day or several times a day. I think even more than that. They do an hourly check-in for updates for their antivirus just inherently, right? So having that constant up to date is critical. So update everything, make sure your antivirus is enabled. Those are the basics.
Yeah. Including your browser, right? So
And your browser.
And your
yes,
browser.
Very important.
And that's a quick thing to do. It's up in the top right usually, and it says, hey, there's an update, relaunch it, and you're good to go.
And browsers nowadays are so good that they'll remember what page you're on. They'll even remember like where in the page you're scrolled down to.
Yeah.
You don't lose any work.
Let's go through a few others here and hear what the explanations is behind some of these types of attacks that you can see. So there's a VIP impersonation, and this is a semi-new one anyway, but probably not a lot of people have heard of this one. So very important person impersonation.
So that is when someone says, hello, I am your CEO and I'm hosting I'm in HR and hosting a company gift party next month. And I don't want you to tell anyone else, but I need you to go purchase gift cards and send me pictures of them with the number scratched off, of course, so that I can make these purchases, so that I can give them away to employees like overseas or something like that. Some sort of I'm impersonating someone else in the organization that you trust and who it makes sense for them to be. I'm the CEO, I need gift cards, or I need you to send me this confidential document because I'm at home where I don't have access to the servers right now, or any of those sorts of things where they're impersonating someone in your organization who you implicitly trust, who implicitly has authority over you in some way. And they're going to make it urgent. So I need these right now. I need this for the end of the day. Yeah. It's 20 minutes till the end of the day. I need this now. Yeah. Please give it to me, right? And so, of course, you want to be a good employee. So you're like, oh, I need to go do this. You're not even thinking about it. You're just responding the way you would with any other task. And then if you send them, perhaps it's too late and just giving those gift cards away. So that's an example of VIP.
Interesting. Payroll fraud.
Payroll fraud is one that's not talked about commonly, but is much more insidious than most. It's very common for employees to change billing addresses or bank accounts or any of those many, many things, right? Maybe they need to change their name. So along the way, they go, hey, I need you to update my bank account details. And then you as the employer go, oh, no problem, let me update those for you. And of course, this email came from a home Gmail address that has your employee's first name, last name, and maybe some numbers on the end, because that's common nowadays, right? That's common for everyone. It's very easy for an attacker to do that and get all of that information, because you're on LinkedIn. Yep. So they have all of your information and your employee's information for this. And then you update it, and then your next payroll goes out, and your employee never gets paid because it's over in the attacker's bank account. So, and of course, the inverse can be true too, where they pretend to be an employee or they can pretend to be the employer saying, hey, we overpaid you, we need money back, or sending the employee a false check for $20,000. Joe, just send us $8,000 back and then keep the last $2,000 for your payroll, or whatever it comes out to be, right? So it goes both directions. But yeah, that's payroll fraud, and it's very insidious.
And the next one is vendor fraud. So this one I heard of quite some time ago, and experienced this, and there's lots. I know there's different ways in which this will happen, but I'm glad to see, like, so I as a business person, I changed my banking info recently, and the organization that I changed it with, so they were going to pay me. They had a number of checks and balances that they went through, and I was so impressed with that, to make sure that they did that, because it made sure it avoided that vendor fraud, that my money that I was supposed to receive didn't go to somebody else somewhere in the world. So talk a little bit about what vendor fraud is and how they go about switching things over.
Yeah, so vendor fraud it's very similar to payroll fraud in concept, fundamentally, because you're switching bank account details, but it's with vendors who you generally don't have a close of a relationship with. It's a little harder to talk to someone directly and say, hey, is this you, right? Because that's easy with your employee. You're just like, hey, is this you? Just double check. But with your vendor, maybe you only talk to them via email. So they want you to update the banking information, or they send you an invoice for a product that one of your employees used, which may or may not be true. And so attempting to defraud the vendor or attempting to have you pay false vendor invoices, both of these are very plausible and happen frequently, is a very common occurrence. In fact, the last major one I'm thinking about was with a nonprofit who they didn't have, I was working with them at the time, and they turned down all of the phishing prevention and IT security, email security things that I suggested, which they're a nonprofit. Their funds are limited. I understand completely, right?
Yeah.
Everything is a push and pull with nonprofits, and makes sense. But unfortunately, they had a truck loan, and they got a grant from the government to pay off that truck loan as they expected to. And so they got emails from the loan organization saying, perfect, no worries. Here's the details, send the payment here, loan will be paid off. Perfect, they got it, they sent the money, and they still had a truck loan. Because, of course, that wasn't actually the loan company, that was the cybercriminals, because they were already in their account, and they were just impersonating them. And because they had been in their account watching the email exchange back and forth about this loan, they knew it was coming due. They knew they were going to get a grant. They knew how much the grant was for. They knew how much the loan was for. They knew the expected dates, the payments, the terminology. They had all the headers and the footers, all of that. So, like, there's no way to really know that any of this was happening without active monitoring. So, but because they were in the account, all they had to do was wait until they got that final email with the bank account details on it, and just tweak a couple numbers, right? Just tweak some routing numbers, tweak maybe the account name or something like that, right? Not very much. It doesn't need to look like much. And of course, sending bank accounts to, or bank payments to random looking accounts is kind of normal. Most accounts aren't named super fun. They're just a string of numbers, right?
Yep.
So there's no way to tell. And then the money's gone.
It's something that's particularly has been targeted at governments, and I've unfortunately heard of nonprofits that have been affected so badly that they've ceased to exist because of it. So it is something that you, unfortunately, you have to take very seriously and get those steps in place, because obviously keep your organization going. What about credential phishing?
Super common, and it's frequently one of the very first steps in a lot of the other attacks. So credential phishing is quite simply, I send you a sign-in link and I say, click here to sign in. Of course, that doesn't actually go to the proper page. It doesn't go to office.com or google.com. It goes to hackerwebsite.com/office.com or something like that. They try and make it appear like it's the right website, and they might clone it so it looks identical, but you're actually giving your credentials to the attacker, not to the website that you think you're going to.
And certainly that's one where we've seen like Interac e-transfers are getting, they've created a whole other site that looks identical. Same with banking.
E-transfers, Office logins, Amazon password resets, any website you can imagine, Netflix, everything you can imagine under the sun, all of them are being spoofed in some way, all of them are being copied.
Thank you for watching, for listening, for sharing, and your reviews and emails. Hello to our listeners in Bangladesh, and listeners in these communities: Ashburn, Virginia, Melbourne, Victoria, Westport, Ontario, Motherwell, Scotland, Yash, Romania. This little podcast is heard or watched in over 400 communities around the world. If you could do me a favor and send the podcast to professors you know so they could use this content in their classroom, I hope it will make our next generation a bit more prepared for what they'll experience in the field. Wherever you listen, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, or Amazon Music, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend by sending them to communicationspodcast.com. Again, that's communicationspodcast.com. So what is one book, documentary, or resource that you can recommend to someone that is interested in learning about either crisis, emergency management, or cyber and cyber attacks?
I'm going to take two wildly different tracks here. And if you want to generally become the cybersecurity expert for your organization, you should go for your CISSP, which is a giant certification. It's super hard and not possible for most people, but that is generally the path you go down if you want to do that. And the other one, much more reasonable for the common man, is there's a podcast that I strongly recommend because it combines entertainment and information beautifully. It's called Darknet Diaries. It's all about ransomware and attack hackers. And the host, what they do is they interview the perpetrator behind a major attack of some sort, be it ransomware, be it phishing, be it some other sort of scheme, and they ask them, hey, how did you do this? Why did you do this? What was your motivation? What was your path like? And so you can really see and understand where the vulnerabilities that they saw and how they saw them. Because one of the things that I learned with that podcast is almost a lot of the prolific scammers out there they actually just get started as kids, just messing around on the internet. And then they see someone scamming, and then they contact them, and they talk to them, and they go, hey, I can do that. And then they just perpetuate, and they follow that path, and they take the path of least resistance. It's very common that they just go, oh, that's kind of simple. I'm just going to start doing that myself. Maybe make a little bit of money, right? So yeah, that's why I strongly recommend forgetting. It's not technical, so don't worry if you're not technical. It's great as just a, hey, here's what's out there in the world in general. And it's because it's all real world experts, because it's the person. It's great.
So what advice would you give communicators who are managing crisis or emergencies that could help us do our job better?
Number one is understand your audience. A lot of crisis communications, particularly in the cybersecurity world, are written either way too friendly or way too technical. To that end, technical end is easy to say. If there's a bunch of jargon in it that the average person doesn't understand, that's not particularly useful. I love it, and I love to see those as an addendum or a link to the full explanation. I'm totally here for that.
Yeah.
That's not useful for the average person. That doesn't reassure them or anything. On the other hand, if you're just saying, hey, everything is fine, there's nothing to worry about, there's just very minor information breach on a couple of people, just non-identifiable information. If you say that, as a cybersecurity expert, I see that and I go, oh, you're lying to me. Because almost every time, the truth is your username was leaked, your passwords were leaked, your email was leaked, probably something more confidential like payment details was leaked, and you should be resetting your password and monitoring your credit score and all of those things because of that breach. But oftentimes that truth comes out months later when the FBI forces people to say that, especially with major organizations. So I like seeing the transparency of, hey, this is what's happened. This is who we think are impacted. Here's what you should do as an abundance of caution. You don't have to, of course, say, hey, we were breached and everything's terrible. Just say, hey, at worst case scenario, you should be resetting it. As an abundance of caution, just reset this, reset your passwords, right? Don't we use passwords anyways, just do that. But we've taken these steps to mitigate it, or we've already kicked the attackers out, or whatever. You should have something in there. A morsel of progress is really important for reassuring people, and then update them in a day or a week or whatever the timeline makes sense.
Perfect. And obviously you would face some stressful situations in doing your work. What do you do to protect your mental health and your mental well-being? What advice do you give for those intense moments?
I'm going to quote a movie here a little bit, which is, I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb, which is Dr. Lovestrange, I think is the title of the movie, where everything is always terrible all the time and everything's on the brink of destruction. And that's life. You just got to take one day at a time, accept it. You can mitigate it as best you can. Yeah. The way I sleep at night is I know that my customers are so much safer on average and so much more secure, and they suffer so many less attacks than the average client. And when those attacks are found, they're discovered so much faster. That's how I'm stay sane. It's because I know I'm doing a good job. I know that my clients are secure. And I know that generally things are fine. Things are safe as long as you're doing the right thing.
Thanks for joining me, Hunter. It's been a pleasure having you. Really good information, and hopefully it helps some of our audience out there to avoid attacks and of course, be ready to mitigate.
Of course, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
We recorded this episode at Romeo's Kitchen and Spirits in the Coast Hotel, just off the Trans-Canada Highway in Kamloops, British Columbia. We appreciate the hospitality and delicious menu at Romeo's Kitchen and Spirits. Thank you for hosting us. We are always looking for interesting guests and topics. Jump on to communicationspodcast.com to send us a message, which is where you can also leave us a review. When you subscribe or share the podcast, I jump in joy. You will find transcripts, links, and information from our guests at communicationspodcast.com. I'd appreciate it if you shared this podcast with someone who works in municipal government, as they face many cyber attacks today. If you like this episode, check out Season 2, Episode 14, Communicating in Time of Chaos, War, and Conflict, with author Doug Levy. Thank you for joining the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast, a production of Butterfly Effect Communications. We are masters of doom and gloom communications, bringing calm to chaos. Goodbye. Hear me later.